Well, my story is not bad, but I bet it's up there with creepiest things. But at least 1 year ago I was in the house getting ready for school and my mom was in the kitchen and my baby brother in the living room. My stepdad was out for a business trip and when I was getting ready I heard a very deep voice call for my baby brother. I remember the exact words, "Hey Reese, come here," name pronounced Rice. I put my toothbrush down and looked in the hallway, then looked at my mom. She asked if I heard it. My simple reply was a flat yes. I walked into my mom's room and the bed sheets were thrown around the room laying on the floor and my baby brother said something along the lines of, "Bubba, where is the man now?" I was startled and kinda scared. Fast forward at least a week, me and my mom were talking in the kitchen and she had a small plastic bowl of rice on the counter perfectly in the center. No nudge or bump would make it fall off. Well, we were talking and out of nowhere the bowl flies off the counter and hits the fridge. We kinda just looked at each other and we stayed at my grandma's that night. Now not too long ago, present time around a few days, I was home alone for the weekend. It was around 1 a.m. I was in the living room playing some PS4 since the TV in the living room was newer, so I'm just playing COD or GTA 5 and out of nowhere my bedroom light turned on and I freaked. I thought someone was in the house, so I went to my mom's room and went to the gun safe and grabbed my handgun. I then proceeded to my room and opened my door and I swear to God I saw a man sitting in my room, so I shot once and I blinked and he was gone. I had to talk to cops what I saw and they didn't really believe me, so I was in some trouble till the next day my mom and stepdad got home and my mom was able to confirm that weird things have happened in the house. Quite a eventful night. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't remember this. My parents went away on holiday for a few days. I was 1 at the time. My siblings were 8 and 11. My parents hired a live-in babysitter for the few days. Friends of my parents had hired her previously and she came really highly recommended from them. Knowing my parents, they would have thoroughly vetted this woman before doing this. Veiled. Turns out she was an alcoholic, who after dropping my sisters to school came back and helped herself to my parents' liquor cabinet. At one point I was crying a lot, because I was 1, and she locked me in my parents' room and refused to let my sisters in to see or check on me. Oldest sister had the smarts to tell her teacher what was going. The teacher knew what parents my parents were close with and told one of them. This badass parent, let's call her Louise, went to our next door neighbor's house and used their phone to call our house. Louise told the babysitter that her daughter didn't take down the homework assignment for that day and asked to speak to my sister to find out what they needed to do. She then told my sister to only answer yes or no to her questions. She asked if we were happy, no, then asked if we would like to come to her house until our parents came back, yes. So Louise rocked in, booted the sitter out and looked after us for the few days until our parents came back. Not the biggest or most shocking story, but it certainly had the potential to be a lot worse. We're so lucky my sister knew to speak to her teacher and that Louise handled it as well as she did. I was visiting my brother in college and my dad at work in Minnesota. We decided, since we never really get to see the North much, we lived in Florida, and although my dad and brother had been living in Minnesota for years at this point, my brother went strictly for educational purposes and my dad went for work. Then he'd fly back every weekend, so we had never been anywhere natural in the state. We'd go camping in Itasca State Park, which is where the Mississippi starts if you don't already know. So we rented this log cabin right by a lake, and we had gone out to the shore around 11:50 at night after eating dinner. We were just sort of looking around, taking in the stars, when out of fucking nowhere this star just starts moving in a very methodical pattern, as in it wasn't a meteor, and it had been stagnant prior to its rapid and seemingly sentient movements. I watched the star for a bit. It was more or less moving in a straight line, but that's when I saw the back end of this fucking thing. The star had moved to about 180 degrees left of me. That's important, because eventually, 180 degrees to the right of me, perfectly in line with this star, there was a huge orange patch lighting up the night sky. It was a perfect circle, with brighter orange almost yellow in the center, and darker brownish orange protruding from its core. It was insane. My family and I just looked at it in amazement, trying to figure out what it could be. I'm a fairly spiritual person, so if it wasn't aliens, then my only other explanation is it was some sort of entity telling me my 16-year-old dog had passed away a couple of hours prior. Sad story, but the point is he passed that day, hours, maybe even minutes before I saw this thing. I really don't know what it was or it could have been. If anybody else is camping in Minnesota and noticed some giant orange disc with a star moving in perfect union with it, let me know. I'd love to see it again, or at least know more about it. I experienced the weirdest, creepiest night ever when I was 15. My friend lived out in the boonies and our group would often make the drive and spend the weekend there. His parents were super chill and basically let us run riot. The closest neighbors were a 30-minute walk away, so the chaos we'd cause never bothered anyone. About an hour away was an old abandoned house. There were rumors a husband had killed his family but was never found and would go back there. There was an old overgrown car, a big garage, and from what you could see inside, the interior was very much the 70s. One of our friends decided we should break in and look around. We were all pretty tipsy, and though I was reluctant, I agreed. He smashed through the side window and let us in the front door. Mail was scattered everywhere, an old piano sat in the corner, and the whole place looked like it had been quickly up and left. He suggested we split up and look around. Being the only girl in the group, I had something to prove and agreed. The house was huge and there were only 4 of us including myself, so it didn't take long for us to be very separated. I ended up in what looked like a teenage boy's room. Only a mattress on the floor, a few posters and 1 or 2 hoodies on the floor of the open closet. I was standing in the far corner looking at one of the posters when I heard my one friend saying my name. He was standing in the doorway, looking pretty freaked out, and said we should leave. I agreed. As I was walking from the corner of the room to the door, I passed the window. All 3 of my friends were in the driveway, including the one that was standing in the doorway. They were looking up at the house, I assume, waiting for me to come out. I froze and quickly looked to the doorway again, in time to see the shoulder of my friend casually walking from the room. I built up my courage and sprinted out of the room, down the hallway, down the stairs, out the front door. My friends were on the brink of tears. Even though I thought I'd only been in there for 10 minutes, 2 hours had gone by. They claimed to go in there looking for me multiple times, but they couldn't find me. I never went back to my friend's house in the boonies, and even though it's a good scary story to tell around the fire, we don't talk about it anymore. When I was 21, I was at a bar with my roommate and one of his friends. I had stepped outside to have a smoke and asked a nearby smoker for a light, to which he obliged. The courteous lighter provider was very kind as we chatted for several minutes. Suddenly a very drunk man walks toward us and starts saying things to me like, "Why are you talking to this dweeb? He looks like he's a real nice guy. Why don't you come talk with me? I'm obviously more interesting than him." I've edited this down to save time. As drunken badass kept going, he crept closer and closer to me, which lead him to try to grab me. Kind lighter provider sees something amiss that I did not. As drunken badass tried to grab me with one hand, he also was reaching for a pistol in his waistband, which he intended to use on me due to my rejections. Kind lighter provider stepped in front of me, without knowing me, and ended up getting shot point blank to the neck. He survived amazingly. Drunken badass took off, and ended up in a firefight with police where he then was shot and died on scene. I think about this every day. We used to live in a 2-story duplex type building that also had a basement suite. The main door lead to our neighbor's door but also lead to a flight of stairs which lead to our door. It can be locked from both the outside and inside, but the inside also has those hook locks on top part of the door in which only a person has to manually lock from the inside. Anyways, my siblings and I were home while our parents were attending a funeral. It was quite late and we were eating dinner when all of a sudden we heard banging on our door. It sounded so aggressive, it genuinely terrified us. Following the banging, the doorknob rattled with great urgency and I, being the oldest, peeked at the eye hole but the light was off. Once more, the banging continued, freaking us out. I tried calling my parents, the calls weren't going through. I was planning on calling the police but I had to calm my siblings down first. The banging stopped for a good 20 minutes until our parents returned. Thing is, my father couldn't get in through the main door because of the hook lock, which meant that somebody locked it from the inside. But here's the thing, my father is the one who locks everything at night when everyone's home, as our neighbor had gone on vacation for 2 months a week prior. My siblings and I had not once went down to lock the door, and the guy in the basement suite does not have access to that area as he is his own entrance. Still creeps me out to this day. When I was a freshman in high school, I was out getting dinner with my dad when my mom called us and told us there were men with assault rifles in our yard and surrounding our neighbor's house. My dad and I quickly drove her home. Turns out it was the SWAT team. We watched from a window across the house as they negotiated with our neighbor to give himself up, but eventually they had to raid the home. When they broke down the door, an officer at the end of the house broke a window and grabbed their kid from the house. Turns out it wasn't their kid and they'd kidnapped him 2 years earlier in another state. The kid was 7 or so, but I remember talking to him a bunch and giving him some of my old toys. Still can't believe after all this time he wasn't their kid. I wouldn't have known otherwise in a million years. I was living at a residential program that had a big old creepy barn. I was one of 2 people who ever used it, so I cleaned out the top floor and turned it into a workout studio. To turn out the lights you need to be on the other side of the barn from the stairs. I remember thinking to myself this would be the perfect time for something spooky to happen. I reassured myself by thinking I'm a 200+ pound dude with 8 years experience in martial arts. I'm scarier than any ghost. The exact moment I thought I'm scarier than any ghost, my iPod with 40% battery left I was using as a flashlight died. I fled the barn so fast and asked a counselor jokingly the next day if someone died in that barn, and he said yeah, a girl slit her wrists in there in the 70s. When I was a kid I had night terrors all the time, so I was around 7 and sleeping in my parents' bed. I woke up in the morning, rolled over and saw 2 people lying there completely covered in burns. Turns out an old couple died in a fire in that house and the realtor didn't tell us when we bought it. So yeah, I see dead people. It's a bit long. Backstory: in my hometown there's a myth saying that if you wake up around 3 to 4 a.m. randomly in the middle of the night, that means someone is watching you sleep. 10-year-old me thought it was just some random story to scare the kids so they stay asleep at night and never gave a second thought about it. One night, I go to bed as usual, roll half of the window blind down so sun can shine into the room in the morning, put my glasses to the side of my bed, turn off all lights, and tuck into my blanket. All of a sudden, I woke up randomly at 3 a.m. It was completely random as I am a pretty heavy sleeper and this is the first time I've ever woke up like this. I remember the feeling I had. It was chilly and I have goosebumps. I repositioned myself to a sitting position and I looked straight in front of me. Nothing was there. I am still half awake, so I try to go back to my sleeping position and turn my head sideways to my right. That's when I saw a figure with a face about 5 feet away near the window. I didn't have my glasses on, but I know it's a body with a face. I was so scared that my entire body froze and the goosebumps continues like crazy. I immediately close my eyes and pretend sleeping. About 10 to 15 minutes later, still covered in fear, I opened one of my eyes and the figure was closer now. It's still staring straight into my eyes. I immediately close my eyes again and I am basically paralyzed by the fear, and then it was already morning by the time I wake up. I kept this thing all to myself, never telling the story to anyone, but after that first occurrence it happens every now and then. From what I heard, everyone's story of this occurrence is pretty much similar to mine. 3 years later, my family moved out of the town and it never happened anymore. I have almost completely forgot about this story until couple months ago. I visited the town for some family event. I was out for jogging in the morning when I overheard children talking about that nightmare-like encounter on their way to school. That very same night, it happened again. The next day, I immediately lied about being called in for work and left that town. Probably too late, but I like telling this story. A friend and I met at a gym outside of our town because this particular gym was open much later than the one we regularly go to. For whatever reason we wanted to get a late workout in, which led to us working out at midnight. When we were done, my friend decided to head right home while I stayed to shower at the gym. When I was done, I went to my car. The parking lot was empty and pitch black. I get in my car and start to head home. As I pull out of the parking lot, this car comes out of nowhere and cuts me off. Foolishly, I roll my window down and shout some not so friendly words at the car. Immediately the car pulls a U-turn and begins to follow me. Initially I think that it's just a coincidence and that he just happens to be going my way too. But as I make more turns, he's still following. I can't see any details about the car because of the darkness, only the two headlights behind me. I start to panic. No cars are on the road except us. We are in the middle of nowhere because it's pretty much farmland on the drive back to my hometown. To ensure that I'm not crazy and that he's actually following me, I make erratic turns that no person going anywhere would make. The car follows me still. Now I'm terrified. I make another foolish mistake. I pull over and plan on confronting the driver. The car following me pulls over 20 feet behind me. I walk towards the car trying to put on brave face, yelling something along the lines of, "What do you want, man?" The car door opens. The driver gets out and it turns out it's none other than my friend who I went to the gym with. When he left the gym parking lot, he realized he didn't know the route home in the dark, so he waited for me to follow my car back home. He thought I knew it was him who was following me and that it was hilarious that I worried he was some killer I happened to piss off. This happened a few months ago. One time I was laying in bed, chillin'. I was certain to be alone in the house, since my mother left the house some time ago and my dad was still at work. Then I heard a phone call. It was my dad, who told me he would be late. I hung up and was just about to go back to my room, but I just decided to go downstairs. For whatever reason, I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water when suddenly I noticed something on my right. There was a woman I had never seen before, standing behind the living room door. There is a glass frame in it. She just stood there and looked at me in a weird manner. At the time, my aunt was living at our house because of illness, so I thought maybe the woman was visiting her. Since this encounter felt kinda weird though, I tried to enter the living room to find out who she was, when I noticed that the living room door was locked. I knew something was wrong here. I knocked at the door and told her to let me in. She slowly opened it. It seemed we were alone in the room, so I asked for her name and how she got inside. She didn't answer and muttered something like, "Where am I? Who's living here?" I had to ask her multiple times till she finally told me her name. I backed up slowly, considering the worst outcomes of this situation. After all, she could bluff, and if she got inside, anyone could have. I backed up slowly to check if the front door was a possible escape option. It was locked. I immediately demanded her to hand me out the keys. Luckily, she did that and also signaled me that she wanted to leave. I opened the door and let her leave. Calling the police afterwards was not optimal behavior in hindsight. In the end, it turned out she had broken out of the psychiatry and was wandering around the neighborhood. My dumbass had forgotten to plug out the keys when entering the house myself. Scary thing, she could have been inside for over an hour or so. I think about it a lot. One night I heard my little brother, Foryo, crying, like a soft cry, down the hall in his room. My family usually just lets him cry it out and he usually goes back to sleep. Well, at night he was crying for a while and I decided to go see if I could soothe him or something. I walk in and he has his face buried in his pillow. I knelt next to his bed and asked if he was alright. My brother says no and that someone from the hall was watching him. I hop onto his bed and he cuddles next to me and he's still crying softly. I told him no one was watching him and that he was safe. He says no, he's out there. I said no one is there, look. He stops crying for a second, goes to look and screams the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard and yells yes he is, he's right there, and starts crying but like hysterical crying. I grab him and pull him close and am totally freaking out. I look out in the halls and nothing was there. I said no one is there, what's wrong? I look down at his bed and say this ugly looking stuffed frog animal. It was situated on the foot of his bed sitting up staring right at him. I promptly kicked it off the bed and said he's gone, he's gone. My brother looked again and did the same thing, just started screaming. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there and held him tight until my parents showed up not too much longer after that and were able to calm him down. It sounds like a long story but it all happened in less than a minute. When everyone was calm we all went back to bed but everyone said no one was able to sleep that night. I still don't know what he saw but I guess it happened one more time after that, after I moved out. It was actually about a month ago. A very dark and cloudy night. I was about to head upstairs before getting a late night final snack, as I usually do. As I turn off the last light in my kitchen I walk around in my near pitch black house, only the sparse moonlight to provide some sense of vision. I do this all the time even after watching a scary movie because I'm not really spooked easily. The last thing I usually do is check for the cat if he is outside that night. I open my large glass sliding door, give a whistle and look for the glow of his reflecting green eyes. I see some eyes this night after my whistle. As per usual I turn on my porch light and open the door wide. The eyes get closer. I look away at my counter as I eye some wafer cookies. I go to reach for a couple of few steps from the glass door I was waiting for the cat at. I suddenly hear a sharp deep bark from outside and think nothing of it. Stupid neighbor dog barking. Immediately after I turn to take a look at my cat, I see a hellhound looking creature sprinting towards the door. My body freezes with fear as I slam the door as he hits the porch. He smashes into the door, barking furiously and slamming the glass with his paws. He appears to be some feral dog I've never seen before. He continues to jump on the door as I quickly turn off the lights and run upstairs. He continues to bark for the next hour, as I lie wide awake on my bed. Me eventually leaves, but I didn't sleep that whole night just waiting on the couch watching the door. Now I have changed my routine to turning off the lights and running upstairs as fast as possible. Haven't seen the dog since but did call animal control about it. Don't know if had rabies or something. Sometime probably around '02, I was 12 or 13. My friend and I were walking in the woods behind his house. There were long paths, and one we liked came to a lake that was a big hole maybe 40 feet across, usually full of standing water. So there were usually tadpoles or mosquito larvae or something cool to see. One day we went out and most of the water had dried up, just mud at the bottom. A few days after that, we were walking that way and it was totally dry, and there was a smashed and torn up tent in the middle. Not muddy like it had been under the water, but like someone had put it up and then it had gotten wrecked. That's not the creepy part. Around the tent were circles and symbols cut into the damp ground. Not like when you draw with a stick, and leave crumbled earth on either side of the line, but sharp lines about the width of a pencil with perfect 90-degree edges down about a half-inch like the soil had been excised with precision. It looked like when people use edging machines or those big wheeled saws to cut into pavement. Neither of us can agree exactly what the symbols were, but it wasn't like the Key of Solomon seals, with big geometric symbols touching the circles, but like circles with 1 or 3 symbols in each, and each circle was connected with a straight line. I haven't seen anything like them in fiction or elsewhere ever. Scared the shit out of us and we hoofed it. I thought they were devil circles for years until I saw real magic symbols. Not even close.